Yeah, I am tough. Because guess what? The interest groups are pretty powerful. And they do need sometimes somebody that's willing to take a 2x4 and smack them upside the head. And I make no bones about that.
Welcome to The Conversation. I'm Dasha Burns. Every week on this show, I invite one of the most compelling and sometimes unexpected power players in Washington and beyond in for a chat to find out how they're navigating and shaping this incredible era of American politics. Today, I'm joined by Rahm Emanuel. He was Chicago mayor. He was White House chief of staff to President Obama. He was U.S. ambassador to Japan. He's had just about every job in politics under the sun, except one. And in recent weeks, Rahm has been vocal about his ideas for how the Democratic Party needs to move forward, fueling speculation that he'll run for president himself. I wanted to ask Rahm about that, but also get him to diagnose some of the issues he sees in the Democratic Party and where it needs to go from here. Here's our interview with Rahm Emanuel. Right now, there is a battle going on within the Democratic Party. It's generational, it's ideological, it's a divide over tactics, and right now it's boiling over within the DNC itself. David Hogg, who may or may not keep his position as vice chair, depending on what happens with this vote coming up next week, he's really been stirring the pot. And I know you've said that Hogg's plan to primary older incumbent candidates in primarily blue safe seats, you said it's a waste of resources. But that doesn't really address the heart of his bigger complaint, which is that there's a real enthusiasm gap in the party, and in part because there's so little turnover in leadership. I mean, just look at the average age of Congress, right? So if you think he's wrong, what's your solution for that?
Yeah, well, there's two things. One is, I'm sorry. I mean, he wants to spend $20 million. I didn't know I'm winning primaries. Donald Trump is sitting on $600 million. We have to win the House. What makes you so confident there's going to be other resources expendable on the targeted swing districts, let alone states, that you can go spend $20 million beating Democrats and not have to worry about that $20 million for beating Republicans? It's an incredible, in my view, waste of resources in a time in which the president of the United States is sitting on top of $600 million, and a flip of the switch can decimate.
But do you think he's getting at a larger problem, though? Do you think he has a point?
I'm going to get to the second part of what you asked. And it deals with, you think, the generation of leaders. And you said enthusiasm. There's no enthusiasm gap in the Democratic Party. Go look at every special since November. Turnout among Democrats is off the charts. So you made in a statement, and I'm not saying this, Dasha, accusatory. There's a difference between where Washington and Democrats are, where the country
I think
Democratic
you can't ignore that there's a frustration within the party over leadership.
I'm sorry, I look at elections. I watch elections, probably to a bad generic disease of mine, but there isn't an enthusiasm gap right now. So that's one. So the other piece of this is, you can say generationally by age, or I'll give you a new idea, focus on the middle class. Maybe the ideas need recharging and rethinking, not just the faces.
But how do you do that without bringing new candidates into the fold?
Well, one of the things that I've been talking about, and that's what would be a new idea, we're going to make the American dream affordable and accessible. We haven't talked about that. We've talked about every other issue that's tangential to the core crux. As somebody that has spent a life in politics and also recruiting, I get the idea of new blood, new energy. That is happening. It's also, as some of us argued in the past, there's a wealth of potential candidates all outside Washington. There is a problem where people stay on way too long in both parties. I don't think it's limited to Democrats. Look at the age of Donald Trump.
No, of course, but what if Democrats could be the party that solved that problem?
Yeah, but it's not. If you have a young face with ideas that don't work, that's not going to solve the problem. You have to have both.
Do you think the young faces don't have the right solutions right now?
That's not what, Dasha. We're going to do something different. We're not going to put words in my mouth. Okay, so that's not what I said.
I'm just trying to clarify.
What I'm saying is, well, first of all, we don't have to. Ready? I'll be simple and direct. We don't have $20 million to waste on Democratic primaries. Give me that $20 million in a targeted race, and you'll pick up a seat, and you'll stop Donald Trump dead in his tracks. Number two, There's young and old candidates, but there's new and old ideas. I'm looking for the ones that work and but can be old, can be new, but whatever it is. I happen to think 2026 will be and has the potential right now, if you look at the data, to be a wave election. Well, that doesn't just mean Congress. What about all the state houses? What about all the county commissioners? What about all the school districts? Yes, you can talk about congressional members, but there's a whole slew. And as somebody that recruited candidates in 2006, the vice presidential nominee, Tim Walz, came out of that class. The Senate leader, in the Senate in New York, Kristen Gillibrand, came out of 2006. I can run down the list for you, bringing candidates up from school board to county commissioners, state legislature. You have a farm team. And so it's not just at one level. I get Washington can only focus on one thing at a time, meaning only the congressional.
Well, no, and so much of the time, it is actually folks like locally at the ground level that are better at delivering the message too. I mean, people trust their local politicians a lot more than they trust folks at the national level. And to that point, you have criticized the Democratic Party. You've called it toxic. You've called it weak and woke. You've also criticized Republicans, for sure. But
I'm an equal opportunity critic.
But a lot of your criticism is aimed at the progressive wing of the party that's been very loud on some of these issues that you don't think the Democratic Party should be focused on. However, whoever becomes the leader of the party, right, you first need to galvanize and unite a party that's pretty fractured right now. So do you see any common ground? And do you risk overcorrection with sort of the anti-woke strategy?
I don't agree with you about unity.
Sure.
So I'll come back to that in a second. What I would say to you is there's a fundamental agreement on the critique that the system is rigged, and it's rigged against middle-class, working-class families. My kids are going to be okay. They got an education, they'll live with a family. They're going to be able to navigate their future. That's not true for every child. Doesn't mean that not every parent doesn't have the same aspirations. And the system, and our critique is, the system is rigged. Rather than getting a shot at the American dream, people are getting a shaft. There are things that, look, and I'll give you an example on this. I created the first city to create free community college. I don't happen to think that's a moderate or progressive idea, neoliberal or real left idea. I happen to think it's an idea that advances people. Minimum wage still hasn't been done at the national level. Is that a progressive? Pro-business? Pro-labor? I don't know. I know that it helps people make ends meet. We did universal pre-K. So to me, you guys, I understand the desire, and I don't mean you guys, but there's this desire to say, oh, there's this division. Well, or this is a progressive idea, that's a moderate new Democratic idea. No, I think there's a lot of consensus. And I go back, starting in my politics, all the way back with Bill Clinton. There was a much more diverse party then with a lot more differences. Today, I actually would tell you, as witnessed by the uniform vote by Democrats against President Trump's big, beautiful bill, that actually there's more cohesion and coherence in the Democrats than there were 10, 20, 30 years ago.
So do you think there's not a problem for the Democratic Party? Like they can go business as usual?
I would never, does this look like sit back and wait? No. I would never say that we don't have challenges, but the idea that somehow there's this massive division, I don't agree with that. I actually think there's a lot more cohesion around what we oppose of Donald Trump. There's cohesion around the analysis that the system is rigged against families. I think what we as Democrats, if you ask me that the biggest thing we're missing is that we don't have a consensus or agreement on the road forward. Put Trump aside. We spend a lot of energy appropriately fighting him, but it has prevented us over the years from figuring out how to fight for America.
You can't just rely on the hoping that he'll fail, right? And that people will be angry.
Well, it's not just hoping that he fails. He is such occupied our mental and emotional space and our psychological space. It is blocking us from doing the most essential work. You know, again, not to overquote Bill Clinton, but he always used to say the most underappreciated thing in politics was ideas. Here's what I would do on education. Here's what I would do on national service. Here's what I would do on healthcare or retirement. Proposing things, thinking through, because by the time 2026 is over, which is a referendum on the Republicans, 2028, Dasha, is a choice. And we have to be able to put up a credible choice, not just in the person, but in the agenda and the ideas associated
right. I
with
mean,
that.
you've got right now Bernie Sanders and AOC touring and drawing really big crowds with this populist economic message. What do you think they have to add to the party? Is there something that Democrats should be watching and replicating there?
They talk about free college. That has been one of the ideas. I happen to have done free community college. I did it around as a city. You have to earn a B average in high school. That's what I had the money to do. We did universal pre-K. We did an extended period of time of family and medical leave. We raised the minimum wage and then pegged it to where it goes up year after year. So there's a lot that we'll be following. That's why I kind of say, I don't think those are progressive ideas. I don't think they're modern ideas. I think they're about investing in people and realizing the importance of investing in people.
You're very good at diagnosing problems, right? Can you diagnose the fundamental problem that the Democratic Party has right now? What is the treatment? Play doctor for a minute.
There's more than one challenge, but the core crux over the years of President Biden's tenure is the party on a whole set of cultural issues looked like they were off on a set of tangential issues and not worried about what was core, not just in the sense of cost of living, although that's core. I've kind of articulated to stop talking about bathrooms and locker rooms and start talking about the classroom. If one child's trying to figure out their pronoun, I accept that, but the rest of the class doesn't know what a pronoun is and can't even define it. And we have an academic problem. We got caught up. Look, I happen to believe my uncle was a cop in Chicago. I worked for President Clinton, about 100,000 community police officers. I happen to think arguing for defunding the police was a massive strategic and policy failure. I happen to think talking about Latinx as if that was a term or the other things like people that are in the caring economy. I've never met anybody in the entire time that I've worked diners, walked in and stood in front of grocery stores, worked at L stops. Nobody's ever come to me and said, I'm in the caring economy. I've had a nurse, I have a social worker, I have a pre-K teacher. I've never heard anybody describe themselves, but we walked around and talked like this. And we were not only out of bounds on cultural issues, we made it look like that was central. Second is we lost confidence on, I think, the economic crux issue of our time. The American dream is unaffordable, it's inaccessible, and that is unacceptable to us as a party. And we are going to work tirelessly, day in and day out, as the number one focus, that it shouldn't be permissible for certain people to own 3, 4, 5, 6 homes, and another family can't get a starter. So to me, that's why we looked weak and woke. And there are other examples. When you look at President Clinton, President Obama, both get elected, both get reelected. They were anchored in mainstream values and had a set of economics that pushed, and the tax code was more progressive when they were done with their presidency than the day they walked in. The economics, in the sense of income gap, wealth gap, had shrunk. There was, as I like to say, there was peace and prosperity. So which one do you not like? In the last State of the Union by President Biden, when he wasn't reading his address, he used
I know
the
where you're
term
going with this. Illegal immigrant. And then apologized
all
for
the groups,
it.
all the groups in D.C. who represent nobody started yelling at him. And he said, okay, the next day I apologize and I use undocumented. No, I just think he should have just said, hey, they're immigrants. They cross the border illegally. I'm going to use my term. You use your term. Whatever you want to do, you do. I'm going to do what I'm comfortable with what I said. That would have shut it down.
I have heard many a podcast host ask you to announce that you're running for president on their podcast. I will not do that to you.
Yeah, don't waste your time.
But it is common wisdom that that's something that you are considering. My colleague Jonathan Martin did a great profile of you. He included a quote from a longtime South Carolina Democratic lawmaker saying, quote, "I'm not sure people in South Carolina know or care who Rahm Emanuel is. His connection to Barack Obama is decades old. We're in a different time." Like in this podcast, you've quoted Obama and Clinton several times. Do you think that would be a hurdle for you, that people feel like you are a little more backwards looking given your associations?
I'm quoting them because since Franklin Delano Roosevelt, they're the only presidents both got reelected. That's kind of like a good sign. Number two, I'm not going to run away from my background. That's, hopefully I've gotten some wisdom and some judgment out of it. It would be foolish. And I think that, if somebody wants to run for president and for the Democratic nomination, trashing those two. I don't want to get in the way of you doing that.
A lot of people would say...
that's not going to be... Look, let me say this, and let me give you one other example.
I'm about to give you a compliment, so let me get in there.
Well, in that case, let me shut up.
Oh.
No, but here's my thing. When I ran in 2002 for Congress, I got a lot of advice from people. Oh, don't let Bill Clinton come in. He's not popular, whatever. One is I'm loyal. Number two, I'm not running away from my tenure. In fact, I'm going to talk about having taken on the insurance industry to create the children's insurance program, which is what I was responsible for doing with others in the White House. I took on the NRA to both pass the Brady Bill and so on. I'm not going to run away from not only my tenure, but the record he allowed me to somewhat run on. So I wouldn't do it if I was running for president. And it doesn't mean the guy in the Jonathan Martin story is right, but I'm not sure that President Obama is unpopular in South Carolina. We'll see. We'll test that maybe. But I happen to think it's part of my formative years, and I learned a lot from it. Now, hopefully, I have both the judgment, the character, and the ability to say when I did something wrong, learn from it. When I did something right and was around something right, learn from it. You
bring me to my next point. Here's the compliment. And
is this the compliment?
Okay, wait a second. But it comes with a downside.
Do we need it? Oh, you're such a journalist.
Of course, I can't just give you compliments.
So
listen,
you sound like a family member.
A lot of people would say, here's the compliment. A lot of people would say that you are one of the sharpest political minds out there. And we've talked about it already. You're very good at diagnosing weaknesses, whether it's in policy or politics or people. So if you were advising yourself as a candidate, how would you evaluate your weaknesses?
Like in life, this is going to be true for you. It's true for me. It's true for all of us. Your strengths are your weaknesses.
What do you mean by that?
And you're not wrong somewhat. There will be an energy for new, but there will also be an energy for candor. I don't think anybody ever says that Rahm Emanuel just lets an idea above a bubble above his head and never says it. If anything, I say exactly what's on my pants. So there will be a place for candor.
That could get you in trouble, too.
Exactly. That your strength is your weakness. Exactly my point.
You do have a reputation, I'll say, for being, for lack of a better word, like kind of an asshole. But I wonder if you wear that as a badge of honor, though. Do you think Democrats need more assholes right now?
When it came to taking on the NRA to create the assault weapon and Brady Bill and make it the law of the land, I got that assignment. When it came to taking on the insurance companies to create the children's health insurance program, I got that assignment. When it came to not only getting healthcare done, but taking on the banks and creating the Dodd-Frank legislation, I got that assignment. So, yeah, I am tough. Because guess what? The interest groups are pretty powerful. And they do need sometimes somebody that's willing to take a 2x4 and smack them upside the head. And I make no bones about that.
I watched you on Jon Stewart's show. You guys are just a treat to listen to the back and forth between you two.
Wait a second. Then, if you did watch us, wouldn't you agree, Dasha, I was taller than him?
Okay. Oh, he's going to be so mad. I do think you were taller by like half an inch. I mean, you're both, well, you're not towering giants.
We are arguing between 5'8" and 5'8.5". That's what we were arguing about.
I'll give you the half inch. I'll give you the half inch.
That's it. I have his number. I want you to call him at the end of the show. Okay.
You said to him that there were 6 names that you had in mind for 2028 that'd be great candidates, but you filibustered, as you have done several times here, and you only got to Josh Shapiro. So who are the other 5 names?
No, I think I only got to Josh Shapiro because A, he cut him off, and B, I'm not going to do that.
You're not going to list the other names? You teased them.
No, well, they'll stay a tease.
All right.
You know all the names.
Yeah,
it's all the names that are circulating.
No one that's less obvious, like no one from, some mayor in some small town that you think would be great.
We have a wealth of riches, which is a lot of talent around the country. I don't think we should have a nominee with a 202 area code associated with the legislative branch. This is my view.
I think a lot of 202 area codes will run or want to run, but I think the American people have sent a message.
I think, there's a history of wanting change, and the best way to represent that change is not inside the Beltway, but outside.
I do want to pivot to kind of a more solemn topic, because this is, in a lot of ways, a really solemn time in our politics and in our culture. And obviously this week, it'd be hard for anyone to argue that there aren't legitimate issues around anti-Semitism in this country. I'm talking about the Boulder hate attack. There have been just a number of devastating incidents. And you said recently that anti-Semitism has always existed in this country, but now people are being given a permission slip. President Trump has seized on that. He's come down hard on anti-Semitism. He's also cited it for his moves on education and on denying and revoking visas. And I know you've said he's using anti-Semitism for political ends. At the same time, the Democratic Party is trying to have this nuanced conversation about anti-Zionism versus anti-Semitism. Do you think the Democrats are losing on this issue in sort of getting into the weeds of this when people, it's really become kind of life and death for Jewish Americans?
Look, as somebody, like I don't know if you know this, but like the shooter in the DC incident last week, that individual was at my house many times protesting, and I've seen him around. And that's been reported. I used to tease Obama about this bit because when I ran for Congress, I had to show my birth certificate, only candidate of the five.
Wow.
I said I was a birther before you were a birther. And they were playing off the old anti-Semitic trope that a Jew's not from here, not one of us. That's what that was. In the same way that when I was trying to be kicked off the ballot for running for mayor, the only reason I left Chicago was to serve the president of the United States. He's not from here, not one of us. It's an
The
old
dual loyalties trope, yeah.
Yeah. So that said, anti-Semitism always existed. What's recent in America is that it's now got a permission slip to flip into violence and to being public. Used to be people were embarrassed to say ugly things. Now you have people walking on Charlottesville, Virginia, the Jews will not replace us, or the Tree of Life Synagogue, or Governor Shapiro at his home, or the incident the other day with the embassy employees in both D.C. and then recently in Boulder, Colorado. Yeah. And Jews are 3% of the population, but almost 2/3 to 3/4 of all religious hate crimes. Every 5 of the last 6 years have set records in both anti-Semitic acts and some of them violent. I don't think any one party owns the permission slip from anti-Semitism becoming violent. Both extreme out of both. But for a long time, there were travelers on the very far left who said, no, this is anti-Zionism. It's not anti-Semitism. But it's very clear the resistance at all cost, all expenses gave a permission slip to that type of violence. There's just no doubt about it. And it wasn't anti-Zionism. It was anti-Jew, which is anti-Semitism, which is what the people, American citizens in Boulder, were killed for because they were Jewish. But as somebody who got elected in a district that Roman Kuczynski, Dan Rostenkowski, Frank Annunzio, Rob Blagojevich, Mike Quigley, Flanagan, Representative Rahm Emanuel got elected there. So I have seen the best of America. I got elected in a city that had never had a Jewish mayor, where only 3% of the population is Jewish. I had a neighbor who I still don't know, when somebody spray painted Nazi symbols on my fence, painted over it the next day when Amy and I were still in Tokyo. So I've seen the best of America. What I am angry about when it relates to President Trump is like in that 3-page letter to Harvard where he's complaining, he never mentions anti-Semitism. I think our universities gave a permission slip to a hostile environment to their Jewish student body, and they should be called on the carpet for it.
Do you think the Democratic Party needs to stand on that more firmly, on that kind of argument?
I'm not Mr. Democrat, but I'm a very vocal person. And I'm clear what my philosophy is and what party I affiliate with. And I do think the Democratic Party has always stood against anti-Semitism. If you look at the history of the Jewish community and the spikes in anti-Semitism, not just in America, but over our 2,000 plus year history, they happen in great economic stress. And I'm not saying there isn't stress now, but it's interesting to me as somebody who lived through on the front lines the financial meltdown of 2008 and the Great Recession. While there was anti-Semitism, as I said, it always exists. It's now that you're seeing violence associated with it in a way that you did back in 08, 09. So what is new here? You can talk about, quote unquote, what's happening in the Gaza Strip, et cetera. There's ways to unravel that. But to me, there has been a permissiveness that in the name of anti-Semitism, they have gotten the goods through customs, and it has permitted to morph, evolve, and become anti-Semitic, and it's been given a permission slip to act upon in a violent way. And it requires not just Democrats, no disrespect, it requires everybody of all faiths to speak out on it. It's not a responsibility for Jews, and it's not a responsibility for the Democrats. So when somebody says the Jews will not replace us, and the next day there are good people on both sides, breaking news, there aren't good people on both sides. There weren't. One was advocating hatred and the other was not.
Given all of this, and this is, kind of a sensitive question, and I hope you understand where it's coming from, because I saw echoes of this even in the race for vice presidential nominee when Kamala Harris was running, around the conversation around Josh Shapiro and his faith, right? Do you think, given all of this heavy context, that the path is harder for a Jewish candidate?
Don't underestimate the good virtues of the American people. And I'm not just being flippant about I got elected, as I said, in the 5th District of Chicago, never had a Jewish congressman, a city based on kind of ethnic or voting patterns, et cetera. And the predecessors were 2 Polish, 1 Italian, 1 Serbian Catholic, and they nominated and elected 4 times a Jew. I got it in the city of Chicago. So I'd say to you, don't underestimate the judgment or goodness of the American people. And I think I'm pretty pragmatic about politics and almost cold to a point in my analysis.
Do you think Jewish voters who support Trump are being naive?
Naive? Look, I don't know. I had a debate with Mr. Greenblatt, who represented Donald Trump both privately and then represented the United States and the Middle East in his first term. And the question in the debate, moderated by Brett Stevens, was, is Donald Trump good for the Jews? And I said, you can't answer that question because America is very unique. Nowhere in our history as a people has the Jewish community prospered like it has in the United States. Because it's a country based on law, not one man, but the law. It's a country based on self-determination. It's a country based on merit. And it's a country based on the freedom of expression and the freedom of religion. That has made, how does Rahm Emanuel, the son of an immigrant and the grandson of an immigrant, not only become mayor of the city of Chicago, but chief of staff to a president, and then representing the country with the highest honor in overseas as ambassador? It's an incredible country for the Jewish community. It's an incredible country for immigrants of all faiths and walks of life. I disagree on a fundamental level to those who do support President Trump, because I don't think he's been good for America. And if it's not good for America in a very particular way that you've asked the question for me, it's not good for the Jewish community. No Democratic president ever raised the tariffs on the state of Israel. Donald Trump did.
Huh?
When in a very particular moment where Israel's economy is massively suffering, their GDP is shrinking, mainly because the prime minister has been a horrible prime minister. That's a whole separate subject. All that said, only one president raised the tariffs on Israel, Donald Trump. And he didn't raise them, by the way, on Putin, where he's his little poodle. He didn't do it. Putin didn't get Russia didn't get a tariff. Israel got it.
I do want to ask about education quickly, because I know that's such a core value for Jewish families. My husband's Jewish, and that is...
That's not nice, but go
What's
ahead.
that?
But go ahead.
No,
Never
what
mind.
did I do? What did I say?
But it's like being married to a Jew is an excuse for here's my question, but go ahead.
Oh, I don't think I need an excuse for this question. I'm just saying I know how important education is. It also is to me, who I'm an immigrant, and my family emphasize that. Anyway, so education has been a huge focus of yours. It's an issue that you're pushing the party to talk about more. However, Democrats have lost some serious credibility there. I mean, in a huge part due to COVID and shutting down schools, but also some of the cultural debates about schools that have riled up some parents. Like, how do you get the trust of parents back on this issue?
Focus on the classroom. That's why I spoke out against bathrooms and locker rooms are not the focus. The classroom. Yes, one child may be figuring out their pronoun. I respect that. But the rest of the class doesn't know what a pronoun is and can't define it. I'm working on a piece called Art. Attendance, reading, and trust. Set of national standards. Any child misses more than 5% of the school year, they can't graduate to the next level. Reading. Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas have showed us by just returning to the fundamentals, kids at the hardest kids, poor, not limited to, but African-American males, you can raise reading levels sky high. Trust. We're going to use tests to actually let parents know exactly where their kids' reading, math, and other type of academic skills are, where they are comparatively to national standards at first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade. We're not going to teach to the test, but we are going to have an instrument of information so parents can hold schools accountable. Every child is homeschooled. Just not the children that don't go to a public school. Every child's homeschooled. I've had 3 kids that are all grown up, etc. They were homeschooled. We taught them the value of an education. We taught them all the work habits. We taught them a whole bunch of things at home. What happens that there's 3 doors a child walks through that will determine their life? Front door of the school, the front door of the home, and the front door of the place of worship. And if one of those doors is closed, I don't care what the other 2 do. Now, I wasn't a perfect parent. I have 3 kids that will tell you everything I did wrong. Okay? And they have a long litany. They could do a separate podcast with you.
I'll have them
but
on.
But in the end of the day, and I bet you will. But on the end of it, I'm immensely proud of them. I start talking about them, I'll start crying. But we have this stupid debate. Oh, these kids go to school. These kids are homeschooled. Every child's homeschooled. Parents have to play a role in their children's education, both moral education and academic.
So the Emanuel brothers, there's been a lot of literature written about the 3 of you because you have all been so successful in your different fields. What did your parents do right?
They put emphasis on education, they put emphasis on faith, and they put emphasis on family. There's a lot below that. But I'll give you one example on education. When you walked into our house, you came through the side door into the kitchen. That was the front door of the house, basically. You walked in, about 4 feet away was a refrigerator, the side of the refrigerator. My mother and father put all 3 boys' report cards up. So whoever walked in the house saw your report card. And when the next report came out, that went up and the old one came down. So if you got below an A, you got a C, you got a D, you got a B, you got a B minus, anybody could see it. Trust me, that's a motivator.
Thank you. I will let you go.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
I gotta go.
By the way, I'm very aware of my status as a shiksa, so I appreciate you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks so much to Rahm Emanuel for joining the conversation. In a moment, I'll be joined by Elizabeth Ralph, the editor of Politico Magazine, to talk about a Q&A published this week with Miles Taylor. Taylor was an aide in the first Trump administration and wrote an anonymous op-ed criticizing him. Now he's a member of an exclusive yet undesirable club, those who have been personally targeted by President Donald Trump via executive order. Here's my conversation with Politico Magazine editor Elizabeth Ralph to discuss that and more. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining the conversation. We have a couple of magazine stories to talk to you about that are really significant and fascinating. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start with a big interview that is published in the magazine from the man that was once known as Anonymous, now we know as Miles Taylor. How did this whole thing come about?
So back in April, Trump signed an executive order that was targeting Miles Taylor, who, of course, had written this anonymous op-ed back in 2018 criticizing the Trump administration. In the executive order, he accused Miles Taylor of treason, and he was telling his own administration to investigate him, and he was also revoking his security clearances. So it's a big deal, and it was a very specific, hyper-targeted action from Trump. You know, we've heard a lot about his revenge tour, but this was kind of like, whoa, okay, here we go, it's starting.
Because he had done that with institutions, but this was targeting an individual.
Yes, totally. This was sort of like a hyper-specific targeting as part of his revenge tour. It was, at the time, you know, it was an unusual move. So we reached out to him. We wanted to see what that was like, how this was practically changing his life. What essentially happened is that on Tuesday this week, he decided to fight back a little bit through official channels. He filed a formal complaint with the inspectors general in the Trump administration, DHS and DOJ, basically asking them to sort of find that Trump's targeting of him was unconstitutional and out of bounds. He thinks it is.
One of the things that struck me in the conversation was he's got some legal avenues. He's trying to fight back, but he talks about how essentially no matter what happens next, the effect of the executive order, even if it's found to be unconstitutional, it has already had a massive impact on his life.
He basically said this has been entirely destructive to his life. So he's had to quit his job. He's unemployed at the moment. His wife has had to go back to work. She was a stay-at-home mom. And now he's essentially a stay-at-home dad. Largely, it's because he is seen as kind of toxic in political circles at the moment. Trump, in that executive order, didn't just target him. He targeted institutions who were affiliated with him. So, for example, what might have flown under the radar a little bit was Trump asked his administration to revoke the security clearances of the University of Pennsylvania, where Miles Taylor
Which
has
nothing to do with this, with his op-ed or with any of Miles's actions here.
He had been like an adjunct professor there for a little bit. But it just goes to show, so now there's a sort of cloud around him. So beyond that, the Trump administration actually recently fired someone from the Department of Homeland Security who was in a photo at Miles Taylor's wedding years before
found something on social media associating these two.
Yep. And
punished his friend.
Yep. Just out the door. One detail that actually didn't make it into the published Q&A, but that he told Ian Ward, who did the Q&A for us, was that he was hosting a fundraiser for his legal defense fund. So, asking people to donate to his cause. And the restaurant and the caterers pulled out when they found out what the event was going to be for. I mean, that's how deep this goes. There's a chilling
It gets to the caterer level.
Yeah,
that is remarkable. I mean, and that goes to the point, because we've seen this time and again, the act of him putting his signature behind something like this does have an impact, regardless of sort of like the legal machinations and the actual technical aspects of the EO.
Yeah.
The symbolism and the messaging matters, because now you're seeing that if you're even associated with somebody that is in the eye of the storm from the Trump administration, you get caught in the crossfire.
You could see Trump backing off from the executive order because it was found unconstitutional, or the inspectors general told him to shut it down or something, and it not making any difference.
Because the damage has been done for Miles Taylor, at least.
There's sort of two tracks that these unfold on. There's the legal track, there's the official track, and then there's the personal track. And I think you could be cleared officially while also having it be entirely destructive of your life.
I do want to pivot to a lighter subject. That's kind of a hard turn, a sharp turn, perhaps.
Oh, yes, a very defined
turn.
turn.
I did not have on my bingo card that Politico Magazine would be doing a story about strong jawlines via cosmetic procedure in D.C. And if you haven't read this, you guys, you have to. I just ate it up. It's so good. How did that land in your lap?
So we do cover politics, but we also cover the culture of politics and the kind of desires and obsessions and the aesthetics sometimes of the ruling class. I had this hunch because there had been a lot of written about the sort of aesthetics of the MAGA movement. Essentially, what's known as Mar-a-Lago face. Many fillers, brow lifts, Botox. And I wondered if Trump coming into power and, a changeover again in Washington would sort of change the aesthetics of Washington. And so, indeed, I don't even know if you could say this is the MAGA thing only, but the rates of jawline surgery specifically for men
for men
is really going up. So there's like surgical, non-surgical procedures, but basically these DC plastic surgeons and dermatologists are saying that like they're seeing, now where 28% of their male clients once wanted stronger jawlines, now 50%. They also have secret back rooms. Like one of them has a room, you go into a skincare store and then in the back you can like go up a back door and then
like speakeasy style.
Exactly. This is like full on LA.
Well, speaking of LA, I mean, I think about how Trump is the central casting president. He loves the handsome men that are straight out of, the movie version of an army general or whatever. So, like, how much has Trump coming into office accelerated this trend?
I mean, I think the theory in the article is that it certainly does. There's a couple reasons men would want stronger jaws. One is just like historically, a disproportionate number of Fortune 500 CEOs have like strong jaws as opposed to weak ones, or it's like a traditional symbol of power. But also, Trump as a president specifically cares a ton about aesthetics and like, it's not just for the women, right? It's for the men too. And so you could see a world where, if he spends a lot of his time watching you on TV and sort of commenting on how his cabinet does out, on stage, and this would matter a lot to him. So there's like a fair amount of incentive to do that. And there's another interesting point in the article, which is this is a slightly more culturally conservative time. I think Trump's win ushered in kind of a new vibe. Potentially this represents a return to kind of traditional gender norms in a way,
Old school masculinity.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, we've seen over the past few years the rise of the manosphere online, right? So it's like I see Instagram videos of like, men trying to increase their jaws through like eating, like biting like hard pieces of foam. I feel like Andrew Huberman has gotten into this space.
Yeah, I think I've seen a lot of the weird TikTok videos.
Yeah, totally. I don't know what our algorithm is.
Did you guys consider doing a Washington's top jawlines ranking for this?
Oh my God. No, it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Next issue.
Yeah, we should.
Boys, start lobbying Politico Magazine right now.
I should also say, I don't think that there is a known partisan split. I think, I'm not really sure we could say this is a uniquely.
It's more Republican or more Democrat.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, I'm sure we could if we like looked and counted, but it's not. The doctors didn't say that.
Before I let you go, I want to get you to dish on one more thing.
Ooh.
What is your favorite meal that you've had in DC recently? Because I'm a foodie. I need to fuel myself with delicious food if I'm going to do this crazy job.
So I don't remember the specific name of what we got, but I went to Astoria recently. I love their food. It's really good. I think that there was like a walnut shrimp and maybe some Dan noodles and some like wide noodle beef dish, anything. It's all hits, that menu.
Okay, I will take those hits. That sounds fantastic. Elizabeth, thank you so much for running through a whole wide array of good,
I know.
good intel for us today. Appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you so much. This was very fun.
This has been The Conversation with Dasha Burns. We'll be back next week. If you want to catch future episodes of The Conversation, be sure to click that subscribe button below. Thanks for watching.